Welcome back to TRP Podcasts. Ready for another deep dive? Today, let's talk about something we all deal with: fear.
Fear, huh? Yeah, it's definitely something we all experience.
Not just understanding it, though. I'm thinking more like, how do we actually work through it? Get some tools to deal with it.
I like that because, even though fear has kind of a bad reputation, everyone feels it. It's part of being human. It shows up in so many different ways.
So true. Okay, let's break it down a bit. We've all got those everyday fears, right? Like thinking about getting older, or the possibility of being sick, or maybe losing your job.
Right, right. Or even things like relationships going sour or having to speak in public. Those are definitely common ones.
Those are what some people call surface fears, right?
Yeah,
They're connected to specific events or situations that we see as threats.
exactly. They're tied to those things in our world that we see as potentially dangerous or harmful.
But then there's this whole other level, isn't there? That deeper fear, the kind that eats away at you from the inside.
Oh, absolutely. Those are the fears that are more rooted in how we see ourselves. Worries about not being good enough, being rejected, failing, all that stuff.
And those can be tougher to even recognize because they're so tied to our ego and self-worth.
For sure. They're not always as obvious as those surface fears.
Then on top of all that, I've even read about this ultimate fear, like the fear beneath all fears.
Ah, yes. That one's super interesting. The fear that no matter what life throws our way, we won't be able to handle it.
Oh, wow. Yeah. The fear of being overwhelmed, losing control.
Exactly. And that's the fear that can really paralyze us if we let it.
So if we all feel these different kinds of fear to some extent, how do we stop them from running the show? How do we shift from feeling afraid to feeling like we've got this?
That is the million-dollar question. And, the first thing to understand is that fear itself isn't the enemy.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it's what we do with it that makes all the difference.
So it's not about trying to get rid of fear completely.
Not at all. It's more like, think of it as a signal, like that check engine light in your car.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
It's telling you to pay attention, be careful, something might need checking out, but it doesn't mean you have to abandon the car entirely.
You figure out what's going on and you keep driving.
Exactly. You learn to work with it, not against it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so how can we actually make that shift from feeling scared and overwhelmed to feeling powerful, like we can handle whatever comes our way?
Well, one really powerful approach is to consciously shift your mindset.
What do you mean?
Instead of feeling helpless and stuck, focus on the things you can control. You move from feeling trapped to taking charge. That's what we call the pain to power shift.
So instead of getting lost in how bad things are, we shift to focusing on what we can actually do about them.
Exactly. It's a really subtle change in thinking, but it can make a huge difference in how you feel.
That makes sense. Because ultimately, we can't always control what happens to us,
Right.
but we can control how we respond.
You got it. Taking responsibility for how we react is actually one of the most empowering things we can do.
So instead of playing the victim, we step into the driver's seat and become the architects of our own experience.
Exactly. Even in the toughest situations, we have a choice. We can choose our attitude, our thoughts, and our actions. We always have a choice.
It's like that saying, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it.
Precisely. And that 90% how you react, that's where your power lies.
Wow, that is powerful. What are some other ways to build this feeling of power when fear starts creeping in?
Well, something as simple as thinking positive can have a massive impact on how we deal with tough stuff.
You mean things like affirmations?
Yeah. Or being grateful for what you have, even just changing the way you talk about things.
Those things seem so small, but I guess they can really shift your perspective.
They really can. They help create a more positive and supportive headspace.
It's like building up this inner strength so that when those challenges inevitably come, we're ready to face them.
You got it. And that inner strength helps keep fear from holding you back.
Oh, I like that. But what about when fear shows up in relationships?
Relationships, yeah, that's a big one.
What happens when you're growing and changing, but the people around you aren't so comfortable with it?
That's something a lot of people experience as they start stepping outside their comfort zones. Some people might resist or pull back.
So how do you deal with that without giving up on your own growth or hurting those relationships?
It's definitely a balancing act. The key is open and honest communication.
Okay, so you talk to the people in your life about what you're going through.
Exactly. Tell them why these changes are important to you and how they can be there for you.
More like inviting them to understand rather than pushing them away.
You got it. But you also have to remember, you can't force anyone to change or accept your growth.
Right. So sometimes relationships will change or even end as you grow.
It's tough, but it's true. It's okay to feel sad about those losses, but don't let them stop you from moving forward. Focus on the relationships that support and lift you up.
That makes a lot of sense. This is also helpful, but a lot of people get stuck because of fear of making the wrong decision.
Oh yeah, the fear of messing things up, classic.
Totally. Feeling paralyzed by indecision and just terrified of making a mistake.
That's incredibly common. It comes from this idea that there's one right answer and a million wrong ones. But what if we change that way of thinking?
Oh, okay. I'm intrigued. How do we do that?
What if we looked at decisions as a no-lose situation?
No-lose decisions. Tell me more.
It means understanding that every decision, regardless of how it turns out, is a chance to learn and grow.
So there are no wrong decisions, just different outcomes.
Yeah.
Each with its own lessons and experiences.
You got it. You shift from being afraid of failure to being curious about what you might discover.
So it's not about trying to predict the future or controlling everything, but being open to the journey and trusting that you can handle whatever comes.
Exactly. It's about letting go of needing certainty and embracing the fact that life is full of uncertainty.
I love that. So how do we actually put this no-lose thinking into practice? Because that fear of choosing the wrong path can be so paralyzing.
One way is to shift your focus from what you might lose to what you could gain, regardless of the outcome.
Okay, I'm listening.
Ask yourself, what are the good things that could happen with each option? What can I learn from each path?
So instead of getting hung up on all the potential downsides, we focus on the potential upsides.
Exactly. It's a subtle adjustment, but it can have a huge impact on how you make decisions.
It's like turning decision-making from something scary into something exciting.
There you go. And that shift in how you see things can be incredibly freeing.
This has been so eye-opening. We've talked about specific fears and how to handle them, but is there a bigger picture here? Is there a way to cultivate a more general sense of fearlessness in our lives?
That's a great question. And it brings us to the idea of living a full life.
A full life. Okay, what does that mean?
Well, when we put all our eggs in one basket, whether it's our job, relationships, or even material possessions, we become incredibly vulnerable to fear.
Because if that one thing goes away, our whole world falls apart.
Exactly. But what if we diversified? What if we created a life that's rich with different interests, passions, and connections?
So you're talking about having a balance of things in your life.
Precisely. Think about work, relationships, personal growth, hobbies, even giving back to the world.
So having a little bit of everything makes a difference.
Exactly, because when you build this kind of diverse and vibrant life, you're not relying on any one thing for your happiness.
It's like building a safety net for your emotional well-being.
I like that. And when you feel secure and fulfilled in different areas of your life, you're less likely to be controlled by fear. You develop a deeper sense of trust in yourself and the world.
It's like that feeling of inner abundance we talked about earlier. When you feel whole and complete on the inside, you're less likely to be driven by fear and scarcity.
You're totally on track. It all comes back to that inner sense of wholeness and well-being.
It's also inspiring. I'm feeling so much more ready to face my fears and live more courageous life. Are there any other approaches or techniques that can help us get to this place of fearlessness?
Absolutely. There are so many, but one that's particularly powerful is the idea of saying yes to the universe.
Say yes to the universe. Okay, what does that even mean?
It's about embracing everything that life throws at you, even the tough stuff, as opportunities to learn and grow.
Even the tough stuff.
Yeah. It means letting go of resistance, surrendering to the flow of life, and trusting that everything happens for a reason, even if we don't understand it at the time.
So it's about letting go of that need to control everything and trusting that we're exactly where we're supposed to be.
Precisely. It's about having a sense of radical acceptance and being open to whatever life brings.
That sounds both a little scary and super exciting at the same time.
It can definitely be both. But the more you practice saying yes to the universe, the more you open yourself up to possibilities and experiences that you might otherwise miss.
It's like you're expanding your capacity for joy, growth, and even love.
Exactly. And when you approach life with that openness and acceptance, you start seeing challenges not as roadblocks, but as stepping stones on your journey.
That's such a beautiful way to look at it. But how do we actually cultivate this yes mindset? Because honestly, sometimes it's hard to say yes when things feel really difficult or painful.
It definitely takes practice. One way to start is to just notice those moments when you're saying no to the universe.
When we're resisting.
Yeah. When you're complaining, resisting, trying to control everything, you're essentially closing yourself off from life's flow.
So we need to be aware of those times when we're resisting and consciously make a choice to shift our perspective.
Exactly. It's subtle, but it can make a big difference in how you experience the world. Like any new skill, it takes time and patience. But the more you practice saying yes, the easier it becomes.
This is so empowering. It's like we're taking back control and choosing to create a life that aligns with our deepest values and hopes.
Precisely. It's all about stepping into your power and living a life that's authentic, fulfilling, and fearless.
This deep dive into fear has been incredible. I'm feeling so much more equipped to face my own fears and live more courageously. Is there anything else from our discussion that you find particularly important?
You know, it's interesting. We tend to think of fear as this single, big, scary thing. But what we've really uncovered is that fear has many layers.
Many layers, huh?
Yeah, there are all these different types of fear, each with its own triggers and challenges.
So it's not one big monster under the bed, but a bunch of smaller, more manageable fears.
Exactly. And understanding those different kinds of fear is really key to figuring out how to overcome them.
Makes sense.
Knowing the difference between, say, a surface level fear and a deeper ego-driven fear can help you decide how to respond and what tools to use.
That's a really good point. It shows how important it is to be self-aware, to really understand your own relationship with fear.
Absolutely. The more you understand your own patterns of fear, the more power you have to break free from them. And that's how you live a life that's true to yourself.
This has been such a rich conversation. Before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought to consider. What if, instead of trying to conquer fear, we befriended it?
Ooh, befriending fear. I like that. What do you mean?
Instead of seeing it as an enemy, what if we saw it as a wise teacher,
Okay.
a guide leading us toward growth and transformation? What if, by listening to what our fears are telling us, we could unlock some hidden potential? Maybe even discover new levels of courage and resilience.
That's a profound thought. It's a powerful reminder that fear, as uncomfortable as it can actually be a catalyst for amazing growth and self-discovery.
Exactly. So maybe the key isn't to get rid of fear, but to learn to dance with it, to accept it as part of our human experience, and to trust that it can guide us to a more authentic, fulfilling, and courageous life.
Beautifully said. I think we'll leave our listeners with that powerful image, befriending fear.
Yes, and to remember that overcoming fear is a lifelong journey, full of twists and turns, but ultimately it leads to a more empowered and joyful life.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of fear. We'll be back next time with another fascinating topic to explore. Until then, take care, and remember, you have the power to turn fear into a force for positive change.